So, hi everyone. How are you doing? It is another Sunday. I don't know how these Sundays rattle around so fast. We're all supposed to be taking it easy because it's COVID and we don't have a chance to really do the things that we'd normally do. And yet, one Sunday's hardly over, and here we are again. It's time for another Follow Your Star Foundation presentation about creative techniques and outstanding personalities for our patrons and our supporters, and for creative minds everywhere. And we're here at the Follow Your Star Foundation's Yoda Guy movie exhibit, where we do these broadcasts every Sunday to encourage young people to follow their dreams and old people to get out of the chair and pursue that interest before they run out of time or energy to do it. So, for those of you who haven't watched this before, I'm Nick Maley. They call me the Yoda Guy. I'm a creature effects designer who worked on Yoda and 60 other movies. I'm an author and an artist and a bunch of other things too. And today is another cosplay panel. But it's info that's useful for prop makers and armor builders and crafters too. So if cosplay isn't specifically your thing, keep watching. You'll find it touches whatever you do. Today's focus is on choosing from different types of foam products when you're and techniques when you're applying those to building various things. And our resident cosplay expert, Cynthia Kirkland, who's a Disneyland costumer and an award-winning fashion designer, she's going to join me to introduce different types of foam product. And then Beverly Downen, who's the director of Downen Creative Studios. Very fancy. She's the founder of SheProp and SheProp Talk podcast and Cricut cosplay video tutorials, and she's also known as the Marvel becoming Wasp player. And she's going to be joining us to talk about how she applies foam products to her product, to the stuff that she makes. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up Cynthia, and we'll see where we go. How are you, Cynthia? What's happening?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited today to bring Beverly on to talk because I have loved her work for a very long time, extremely knowledgeable, and I really, for any beginners coming into the cosplay scene, she is an incredible resource with her tutorials. So I'm actually really excited to talk today.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty good. So let's just start by talking a little bit about some of the foam products that there are out there, because it seemed to me, I'm an outsider to some extent with cosplay, and it seems to me that on a lot of these discussions that we see, we get mention of different products, and if you're a novice, you wouldn't know one from another.
Oh,
so,
definitely.
Tell us.
Oh yeah, of course. I think starting out with foam, I think, of course, understanding which foam products, because I think anytime someone is explaining their costume build, it's just like foam, 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 foam. But within that simple term, because I mean, foam is just, the makeup of foam is just a collection of polymers. So really, foam is such a broad term that we can use it to describe so many different products and different uses. So yeah, we can go to the first image, Nick, and talk about, I saw the pink insulation foam was one of the first ones. So
yes.
Yes. So I know you've probably used this, of course, Nick, but the pink and blue insulation foam is really readily available for beginners. It's easily carvable. You can get it at any hardware store. I think the first time I used it was actually in middle school. I used it. It's actually great in any sort of electric cutter, like a CNC machine. So this one is really good for large props and, you know, anything that you want very lightweight material but easily carvable, because it's very easily carvable with an X-Acto knife, and it's a great base for someone just, you know, they want to create a like a prop for Halloween, like a set piece or a large prop. So I always recommend Pink, the insulation foam. And then there's another style of insulation.
Basic, you know, with all of these phones, this is about, you know, cutting out layers and building one layer on top of another, right? Do you always
Definitely.
use the same adhesives for one foam or another, or are there different adhesives too?
Oh yeah, no, adhesives are definitely a world unto themselves. I think it's kind of, that is also another big discussion with cosplay. I mean, not only with fabric and anything, is that what kind of adhesive should I use? I think for the insulation foam, um, the adhesive that I used to use quite a bit, to be honest, was any sort of basic adhesive like wood glue or just anything to keep the layers together. Because I think with the insulation foam, the main thing is as long as I keep the layers together, we'll be okay. But finishing is the hardest part. So I would usually finish that with a wood glue or something. It needs layers on the outside to
Yeah,
keep it together. It's
wood
very
glue,
brittle.
wood glue gets kind of hard, doesn't it? I mean,
It
you know,
does.
I would have thought contact adhesive of some sort
Mhm.
would be good for putting the layers together, especially if
Mhm.
what you're making is maybe armor or something that's got to have a bit more flexibility. But you would know a lot better than I would in that area.
Not a problem at all. I think contact adhesive is definitely for foam products altogether. The only difference with the insulation foam is that it's extremely brittle. It won't bend. So really, you're not, you know, you're not getting the full impact of using contact adhesive with it, because contact adhesive does allow you to bend foam, you know, and I
Yeah.
would use it for any other type of foam, but the insulation foam is very different because it doesn't bend at all. Like I wouldn't recommend it. It's
Oh,
really just for carving, you
right.
know.
So that is basically, you know, a critical element for someone who's deciding what foam they're going to use for what product, for what
Hmm.
project. Because if they're using this particular foam, they need to be making something that's basically static, like, you know, like
Hmm.
a tombstone or whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, proper set piece, but nothing, you know, that's not really a wearable foam. I know I had a friend who used it for the first time years ago for like a armor costume. Fell apart as soon as we got to the convention. Just because it's very brittle. It doesn't, you know, it's just it's very difficult. But props, great material.
Yeah, and that's the thing with you know, when I was talking at the beginning, when people think of cosplay, they think about costumes, but you know, prop builders will often go into all kinds of fancy ways to make their stuff when actually they could be carving it, making it, and using foam or
Hmm.
using the foam and then coating it or something else. Your next product here
Hmm.
that we're looking at is
Yeah, so this is another type of insulation foam that you can get at the hardware store. It's just a gap filler. It's an expandable foam. So you spray it, it's an aerosol. You spray it into or onto whatever surface, and then you can actually carve your image out of the dried foam, which should be like the next slide. So we have
yeah,
great.
I've got that right here. So you
Oh,
know,
yeah, no problem.
here you've got the foam. You basically just sprayed a blob that's vaguely
Yeah,
the right shape, and then you're
basically.
carving it down to start to make things that have a particular shape. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another type of like that insulation foam where if you don't want a lot of weight, but you want a lot of like, you know, you need to make big horns or maybe like a big thing on your armor or helmet or something. So I've used that many times. I've used just sprayed it on to the general shape of your product, and then you just kind of carve out of it, and it's pretty versatile material. It's still used pretty widely.
It's basically a compressed urethane foam in a can, and
basically,
if someone is making something that is really big, I would suggest that they go look at Smooth On's foam urethane products, which you buy. You buy a 1 gallon kit and you end up with 2 gallons of this stuff, which would be the equivalent of about 50 of these cans. And so the difference there is you mix it in a cup and pour it in. You can, of course, if you've got shapes that you want to use, you can create, just using clay, you could create a shape like a horn. If you want it bent, you could create walls to put around, to just pour effectively a block that is more or less. Are we all back?
Oh yeah, sorry. Was that me? I apologize. Yes. So speaking of your Smooth On, yes, I have used the pourable moldable expanding foam, and it is pretty incredible. And you're right, like just a little cup, and suddenly you can fill an entire mold. It expands very, very big.
Yeah. Then we've got basically sheet foam for upholstery products. Talk about that.
Yeah, I've used that quite a bit. And once again, like I mostly use it, to be honest, for muscle suits and any time I need just something to have volume, but I still need it to bend, I need to move, and I just need something to pad, So that is another material that is, once again, it's foam, but you're not, it's very open cell. You're not really going to use it for armor, but it's a great material for sculpting, you can use it for like the fursuits and things like that, heads, once again, large volume items, but you don't need it to be rigid. You just need padding. You need a little volume. So
also a good product for puppets too.
That's a good point.
Yoda's body was built out of sheet foam like this, and it was just cut, and the Muppets were largely done that way. They were foam that was cut, shaped, and even sewn. They'd sew the little wrinkles around the eyes and things were just stitched in. So it's a useful material and good when you don't want chafing on the body and other things. And here we got a picture of a suit in progress.
Yes, this is just a general muscle suit in progress. This foam is easily carvable, actually, with proper knives and or heat tools, and then you can also contact adhesive works best with this kind of foam because it's very, very open cell, so you don't want any other liquid adhesives to absorb into the foam. And then once again, stitching can create wonderful indentations, sculptures inside of the foam. So it's extremely versatile. It can be difficult to use if you're kind of maybe not sewing oriented, but it's extremely versatile and a great tool.
And then we've got this kind of cross product that looks really interesting to me, where you can basically mold or shape something, sculpt it almost, and then it'll over 24 hours or so it turns into foam.
Yeah, this is a newer product on the market. Once again, I think within this talk that Nick and I are doing, we're just kind of doing a brief overview of different types of foam that beginner costumers would essentially have access to at like a hardware store, or just, you know, easily find and source tutorials on. Foam Glay is one of the newest products on the market, and it's super versatile because it's easily sculpted by hand. You can get really easy shapes in it, like as you can see by this mask. And even once it's dry, it's still flexible. The same, literally, it's sculptable, but the properties of EVA foam when dry. So it's still very rigid. I've used it on my armor for details similar to this. It's extremely, you can put it inside of a mold and get really nice detail, but still have foam properties. I mean, what really, honestly, it's kind of, when it came on the market, it kind of was a mystical miracle material. But yeah, I really love it.
So the last product that we're talking about today, too, is EVA foam, which is largely used. You know, is that as easily available? It's not really a hardware store item, is it?
It's not really a hardware store item, but it is very, very available in craft stores now. Like, I think more that cosplay has become accessible, it's easily purchased. I used to have to only purchase it online. Now I can run to the craft stores such as Michael's or Joann's, which are the two biggest ones, you know, in America, and I can get the EVA foam very easily.
And that really brings us to our other guest today, the adorable Beverly Downen, and we're going to bring her up to join us to talk about how to apply foam to what she does. Hi, Beverly.
Hi. Hello. Here. Hello. I am like glued to the screen right now, just listening to the both of you talking about all these pieces of foam. I am taking notes, Cynthia. So I'm gonna pick your brain about a few things later. Oh yeah. There's always new stuff to learn about these materials, right? Like, everyone has different experiences with things and what has worked and what hasn't. So, oh yeah, I'm gonna be bugging you about a few things for sure.
Well, today we're picking your brain. I'm gonna step out so that our viewers can see, you know, the lovely ladies. Yeah, they want to look at me for anyway, you know. So, so that you two can talk on about the different things. I'll be popping up some of your slides as you ask for them. As we move on. So I'll catch you later.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So now as we transition from our broad foam talk into, like, there are so many different foams, I wanted to really focus on EVA, because now with cosplay becoming as big as it is, of course, as you know, EVA is literally kind of the quintessential cosplay costuming foam at this point, because I mean, armor, props, you name it, it can do it. And you, Beverly, have used it to an extent that it blows my mind. So I really want to delve deep into, for real, I want to delve deep into kind of your experience with foam, just so we can kind of introduce people to this miracle material.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So yeah, let's dive in. I guess there's just so much to talk about. So yeah, let's get started, Cynthia.
Of course. No, exactly. No problem. We'll dive right into it. And I think, Nick, do you have maybe one of her first that up on the screen real quick, just so we can kind of get the conversation and talk flowing? Oh wow! So this is a armor build specific, and you got some really amazing complex curves on the helmet, on the gauntlets, and also finishing on this is pretty incredible. So for this one, can you talk about like what style, like because EVA foam has two different weights, correct? Like it has the lightweight and it has the heavyweight. So
well, yeah. So EVA foam, if we're talking about sheets of EVA foam, and even you can get it in other forms like dowels and round round shapes. I actually have examples here that we can talk about later when we're talking about the different types of forms that EVA foam comes in that you can get. But the density of EVA foam is, there's so many different kinds now. I know that TNT Cosplay has several different densities. And when we're talking about densities of EVA foam, we're talking about how rigid it is. So, and that will matter. Sorry, let me get my examples out.
No problem. I even have some examples.
This is very show and tell oriented. And okay, I can start with this. So with the different densities of EVA foam, that really lends itself to things like flexibility of the foam and the ease of use. Let's say, for example, let's say I wanted to make a shield, something that doesn't really need to flex. I'm not forming it around a body. I'm not trying to turn it into a lot of complex curves. I could use a much more dense EVA foam, like, let's see, what do they call it? They call it at TNT Cosplay Supply.com, which is one of my favorite places to get foam. They have one called EVA 38 and EVA 70. EVA 70 is a little bit more dense. It's also a 2 millimeter foam that you can sew through. So, I mean, there's so many different variations involved. You can get a really dense EVA foam sheet that is thick, and an application that would be good for that would be like a shield or anything that you need to have a little bit more rigid. You could even use it underneath other things as a support foam. So, I mean, the applications are really, really endless.
Definitely.
Especially when you start getting into the different densities. But if you are starting out and you are just overwhelmed with all of the different kinds of foam that is out there and the different thicknesses, I will tell my favorite kind and thickness to have on stock all the time is I like to have 2 millimeter EVA foam of any kind of density. And I also like to have 4 millimeter or 6 millimeter, and you can layer those on top of each other to create thicker versions, but they're pretty flexible. So it lends itself to being sandwiched together to make more rigid pieces. Like actually my Hela helmet, that's how I made that. I don't know if there's a photo that we can throw up there of my Hela helmet, but that one I used. I think I used the Yaya Han foam for that, actually. 2 sheets of it. Yeah, it comes in, I forget the exact dimensions of the sheets, but the Yaya Han foam is available at Joann's, which is really, really, really helpful if you need something right away. Actually, what's on the screen right now is my first prop ever, which I love pointing out because I watched a video tutorial. I watched EvilTedSmith.com.
Evil Ted is great.
Oh, he's amazing. He's been working in the industry for a long, long, long time. And so now he is making tutorials and just trying to get his knowledge out there to everybody. But I watched a video tutorial that he did, one of his first ones, about making a foam helmet. And then I made this. And so I made this helmet out of the floor mats that you can get at a hardware store. And I have it right over here.
That's incredible. So yeah, once again, so those are literally, I've used those before. Like this was actually kind of before EVA foam in general was as accessible as it was. You could use those high impact floor mats that you can just get at a hardware store. They're like the little puzzle mats, and you can use. We used to use those for armor constantly. So like I think that's kind of where foam is so incredible, is that the accessibility and different styles that you can procure are pretty incredible. And I don't think people realize that because they're really stuck on the craft foam sheets, but really it comes in so many different varieties and resources. So that's incredible. I didn't realize that the Magneto helmet was the floor mat. That's awesome.
Yeah, it really was.
That's incredible.
The other thing that is great about the floor mat foam is that it's fairly inexpensive, and I use it a lot. If I have a thicker prop that I'm making, like a shield, let's say, or some sort of anything that I know is going to have to be a little bit thicker, I'm going to use a floor mat because it's inexpensive. I know that I can get more right away. You can get a pack of, I think, like 4 or 6 of them from Harbor Freight for about like $10.
Exactly.
So it's a really great. I actually have it all over my floor in my studio. So I love that stuff, and it is a really great. You can make amazing things with very inexpensive materials like that. You don't have to order it online and spend $100 on your EVA foam. I recommend just going out, just trying it, just get your utility knife and start cutting on it and using it. The same glues and the same paints and the same finishing techniques can be applied to that same foam as you can apply to every other foam. So it's a really great place to get your feet wet, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely. I think it was one of the first times I had my feet wet was with the just the floor mat foam, and it also goes a long distance. Like the packs that you can buy at the hardware store. Like I think one of them I was able to make a complete, just because I'm a smaller person, but like the complete front of a breastplate out of like one sheet. And I was like, wow, it's super inexpensive. And it's like, what, $10 for a pack of 4 of them. But so that's a great place for people to start. So let me see if we can transition to the next slide and kind of just take the, now this, of course, that's kind of why this is so fascinating, is that you can come from the floor mat and the helmet, and then you can transition into super, super complex builds and materials similar to Hippolyta here from Wonder Woman. And so this one is, you used a lot of different thicknesses of foam on this, as well as techniques. Actually, do you mind if we go to Thor? Would Thor actually be a better transition to Hippolyta?
Sure. Yeah, let's go to Thor, and we can definitely talk about that because there's a slightly different. So I think in the slides it's up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. There it is. Right underneath Hippolyta.
Sorry. Yeah. So I know a little bit about like the years and the like time period of some of your costumes.
Right.
So I feel like
I'm really not sure what you're asking for. Which
sorry.
That one right there.
There we go. That one. Yeah.
I got it.
It's all good. Sorry about that, Nick. It's okay. It's all good.
In the order that I got them. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No. They were just uploaded in the order received, and that's totally okay. No problem. Thank you. So Thor, we have. I feel like this is a good transition point because coming from the large floor mat foam, now we've come to, it looks like you're discovering different thicknesses of foam and different heating techniques and things like that. So can you talk about how you transitioned from Magneto to now this more complex build?
Yeah, well, I watched a video on how to make a duct tape dummy, which is just making a dress form of yourself so that you can make a closer fit armor. So that robot costume that you saw earlier, that was, I think maybe I had used one, but I was using my husband as the form for that. So I'm sorry I didn't send this picture to you, but when I was drafting out the pattern, I realized that I wanted to make it a little bit more flush to the body. And so having a thicker foam really wasn't going to work for that. So I made my pattern, and then I transferred that pattern over to actually 2mm foam for all of the intricate parts on the top. Now this particular costume, and this is one thing that I love about EVA foam, is that you can cover it with things. Some of this has been covered with Worbla, which is a thermoplastic. And I did that for rigidity to add a little bit of strength to the EVA foam. because a lot of it was going to be heavy on the top, and so I needed the structure to be a little bit more, oomph. But I really needed to have the ability to have those layers and those strips of material kind of flowing around his form. So the EVA foam, the 2mm EVA foam, worked really, really well for this. Another thing that I did here on this costume was I covered parts of it with fabric. And so foam is great because you can glue it. You can glue all sorts of things to the surface and make it look like anything else. You can make it look like leather with certain techniques with heat, and I use a tinfoil ball and sometimes an iron. But yeah, it's a really, really great material to have underneath whatever it is that you're going to be layering on top of that. I do have his cape part there is another piece of, and I don't know where I must have thrown it. Oh, it's the floor mat again.
Yeah, I was about to say, I noticed that his cape does, because Thor, and that was actually one project that I had worked on for Disney, his cape swoops back. So there is an underlying structure under his cape. So yeah, it looks incredible. And yeah, you're right. Like those floor mats, the foam, you can do so much. Like, here's the other thing, as you said, foam doesn't have to be a standalone material. It's an incredible, as we call in the industry, interface. So you can put it in under structure, such as the instead of buying like super thick leather, you can cover the foam as you did for Thor in like a thin layer of pleather, you know, just to cut down on techniques you have to learn, materials you have to buy. So that is actually something that people can really think about, is like not only using foam standalone, but with, you know, as an underlying little structure in the cake. So yeah, you nailed it. I love this build. This is an incredible build. And also, just to go back to your duct tape form, just for beginners, if you want to have something that fits your body very, very well, research how to create just a simple duct tape form, duct tape patterns on yourself. Kamui Cosplay has a lot of great tutorials on that, as well as Beverly's progress photos. So yeah, look into resources such as that. And I think that was one of the main things I pulled out of the talk real quick. But yeah, so next, we can go, there was the robot costume you discussed, and that was also kind of using the duct tape, or?
Yeah, I think I used the form, but then I think it was one of the first ones that I made. So I have definitely improved my skills for making a duct tape dummy. So I wound up using his body for a lot of the things that I needed to make for him. I should point out that the helmet is actually a resin cast, but the master that I made, I used clay, but I also realized I didn't have enough clay, so I used a lot of foam in the master sculpt to make that. So, but the weapon, all of everything there is foam. And I'm also going to point out that that's my stepdaughter there. She made that costume. That was her first one.
I thought you made that for her. That's incredible.
I love because she, I think, was 12 or 13, I think, when she made that. And she was able to use all the materials and everything. She cut everything. She heat formed everything. I did some of the gluing for her because we were using contact cement, and we had one respirator and it was mine. So I did all of that for her, because you don't want to use contact cement inside. Safety.
Safety.
Use a respirator when you're using glue. Also, if you're heating, so when I'm talking about heating up EVA foam, one of the processes that you can do to help form foam into a shape that you want, like let's say you are trying to get like a helmet or any kind of round shape or curved shape, you can apply heat to the surface of the foam, and then it becomes malleable. So you can kind of stick your thumb in it, and you can make part of it a little bit more round, and that ties in with the different densities of the foam that you're using. So if you're using a low density foam, it's going to be pretty easy for you to get like a breast cup shape or something that like a pauldron kind of shape. Something that isn't quite as rigid, again, like a prop or something like that would be great. But
yeah, so you're totally right about that. Like heat guns, ovens, any sort of like heat source that you can have easy access to is perfect. Like that's really the main material or the main source for sculpting foam. So yeah, I absolutely love that.
Tell me, how have you created this kind of chest shape in your foam there? Have you done that with heat, or have you sewn it, or have you layered it? What did you do?
Well, I have an example right here. Let me grab it real quick.
Yeah,
do
perfect.
A little show and tell. Okay, so this is a corset shape that I made, and this I'll show you the inside of it. I made with I'm checking the thickness here. I think it's 4mm EVA foam.
Okay.
So this is a corset pattern.
Ah, okay.
That I cut out, and then I glued them together.
Okay.
And so when you glue them together, sometimes the edges that you glue together can have a little bit of a ridge, or it's not quite round enough to make the transition between these edges really smooth. So the way to get around that is to heat it up with some foam and then manipulate it over a shape. I use my knee a lot. Sometimes I use really any, like a bowl, something that is rigid. You can literally heat form it over, like apply the heat and then kind of work out the shape after it's all glued together. And having a strong glue like barge cement, which is you can find it at a leather supply store. You can also find it on Amazon. Having a very strong glue like that contact cement is going to be really important for keeping your seams together. Using hot glue and things like that, you can use that on EVA foam, but I wouldn't recommend it on any seams that are going to be stressed, because it's just going to crack apart.
And so kind of using that technique for the chest piece, so you essentially sculpted each muscle in the foam and then covered that in the fabric to kind of give that nice muscle chest piece. I think a lot of people are really curious about, like, how to make costumes, muscles in costumes, like you did for the robot. So I think it looks incredible.
Oh, well, thank you. I felt
so
like
how
I
did you do that one?
Making it up as I went. So I had kind of a flat chest piece underneath. I made that piece kind of early on, and as you look back at your prior projects, you think about like 10,000 ways that you could do better on creating it. But for that particular one, what I did was I had kind of a flat piece, and then I glued quilting batting to the front of it, and then I stretched a 4-way stretch fabric over it, and then glued the muscles down.
Perfect.
In between. Yeah, and there were a couple of points where I had to sew it down, but there's no sewing involved. Although you can sew EVA foam, you just need to make sure that your sewing machine is that it's not too thick for your sewing machine. But yeah, that one was kind of an experiment, but I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I hit a lot of my seam primes with more foam, with finished foam. So if you took all those elements off, it's all kind of wonky underneath, but that's totally fine. That's one of my favorite pieces. Absolutely.
It looks incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So this is an example of, So sorry to interrupt, but yeah, we're going to go kind of more into how to get really nice detail into foam, because that is, once again, it is a rigid material, so it can capture embossing and cutting and really nice texture into it. So, and you use that a lot for your Wasp, and of course you're going to talk about Cricut, right?
Yes. So I was invited by Marvel Becoming to do an episode on the Wasp from Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so I made that costume as accurate as I possibly could. And because I didn't have access to 3D printing at the time, or whatever the heck they used for the chest
know.
piece, that was really that was a challenge. But what I was able to do with that was, and going back to using a complex curve or shaping a sheet of foam over an object to create a dome. I did that for the chest piece, and I also did that for the abdominal pieces as well, which those abdominal pieces I folded over more foam. Like, you'd be amazed at how much of that costume is foam. And I know that a lot of people, some people used leather for their breast piece, but I didn't really want to use leather. I wanted to use foam. So
it's more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more expensive, and I think that the way that I did it was a little less stressful for me, because I knew that I could do it again if I messed it up, because it's so inexpensive, that material.
Exactly.
But I used the Cricut cutter, which is a die cutter, to help me create the hexagonal shapes that make up the breast piece. And that was really, really great to have a little robot doing that for me. I could do that by hand. I could hand stamp things, but it was really nice to be able to use the material in a device like that to help me get that project, really level up on that project.
Yeah, I know. The little robots are really helping us these days.
They really are.
But yeah.
Actually, that's how I made, I don't know if you can tell.
Oh, I can see the texture on the scale
there.
Yeah,
yes, that is scored. That is just scored into the surface with my Cricut.
Yeah, so that's the Cricut. That's also one thing about the Cricut that I love, is that it's not just about cutting, but you can also just kind of put embossed designs in it with the right settings and the right tool head. And that's kind of, yeah. So I love that you brought that up as well, because as you've shown, the versatility of using machines with foam, because a lot of people now are realizing that these little machines, whether it's 3D printers or Cricuts, we are really able to produce with our foam a lot of textures that we had to do by hand previously. So, but yeah, the embossing is an incredible tool that I don't see a lot of people yet getting into the embossing, because the cutting is just so incredible. But that is another great feature of the Cricut.
Yeah, it really is. And so we're talking about scoring, which is using your blade to cut a very slight cut into the surface of the foam. And if you do that before you apply your heat gun to the surface, once you do apply the heat to the surface, and those cells on the surface of the foam, when they start to close up because of the heat, you're going to see that whatever cut that is that you made, it's going to open up, which can be really great and really not great, depending on if you have a surprise cut somewhere that you weren't expecting. That happens to me a lot, because sometimes I mean, it'll happen. But,
yeah, so just as an example, because I tried to score some things, but it got I didn't really like the width. It got super messy. But sometimes, like, this is exactly what it is. I didn't cut directly through the foam all the way. Like, you can't see me behind the foam, but it just kind of creates, like, I just did one cut, heated it, and the foam, because one reason foam is able to create structure and rigidity is because when you get thin regular foam like this, there are cells inside of it. So it's not a one piece structure. It has like little pockets of air inside of it. So as you're heating it, you're essentially reducing those pockets. And so it's making it expand and contract and kind of move as you're doing it, but it's also creating that rigidity because it's closing those cells and not letting it move anymore. So science, hey.
Yeah, that's a really great way. That's perfect. That is the perfect way to describe that. Absolutely. I also And going back to the different densities of the foam, there are so many different brands of foam. When we started talking, we were talking about floor mats from the hardware store, which you can get. There's also TNT Cosplay Supply, and they've got like lots of different variations, and they've got dowels, and they've got all sorts of different things that you can try out. There's also HD foam by SKS Props that you can find at Blick. That foam I really love. It is really easy to work with. It's the foam that I have tried is a little bit softer, and so getting a really nice complex curve by using heat and manipulating it over a shape is really easy to do with that foam. The other thing that I have discovered with the SKS foam is, gosh, and I should have like grabbed my samples. I'm like looking around my shop to see if I can find my samples. I don't know
It's
that
all good.
but
It's all good.
what you can do with that foam is, we were talking about scoring, where you're using the knife to just barely cut the surface and you heat it up. If you heat up that foam enough when you have scored it, you could potentially create a pillowed effect on the other side of that foam.
Yeah.
So because the foam that I have tried has a lower density, it is much more apt to form around, to kind of like squeeze in and form really neat shapes.
I actually think I have an example of that, because you were the one that taught me that technique. That's what I think is so hilarious, because I don't know if anybody can, because the lining or whatever, and it's so detailed, but can you see this on the surface here? It's because I scored it from the back and heated it. And so because the cells, as we described, kind of contract, it creates ridges and kind of an interesting shape on the reverse side of it. So it kind of looks like an embossing effect. Like, yeah, I think you can kind of, there we go. You can kind of see that. I know there's a lot of glue on it. It's really messy, but that's actually the technique that Beverly's describing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good way to maybe add some texture and some interesting effects to your costumes and your props. I'm just always overwhelmed by all of the different ways that something can be done. And I love tinkering with, I feel like a mad scientist sometimes, because I love tinkering. I love trying different techniques with the Cricut and with like just everything. It's just such a fun process for me.
Exactly. So, beautiful. Yay, yeah. We get to see Waspy. I love her.
Yes. So you can see here the abdomen pieces. So I'm noticing that what we can see here is that the sheet is kind of wrinkly right now, and that is because I heated it up. I hit it with a glue with a heat gun to close up those cell foams, the cell surface on the foam, and then I painted it. And then the bottom piece there that you are seeing, that is what I did, was I wrapped that around another piece of foam, and then I glued it to a chest piece, and then sewed that to the entire costume. One thing to keep in mind with if you are doing this kind of thing is to make sure that you have a sturdy backing. If you are planning on using foam this close to your body like this, you can see on the chest pieces, right underneath that gold is actually some Warbler. And so I glued the foam onto the Warbler cups, and Warbler is another thermoplastic, and that helped maintain that rigidity that I needed. If I didn't have that in there, those would collapse, they would rip, there would be no structure underneath that at all, and I'd be very sad.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I love that you brought that up, as far as like foam is sewable, but it's also kind of in a way it's pretty brittle, so you'd need some sort of like strengthener or backing behind it so it kind of doesn't rip. Because once you essentially put your needle through it and make a hole, you've already like essentially kind of in a way damaged it, because you're not gonna, it's not a self-healing material, as we say. Right. But I will say, just to interject, thermoplastic. Beverly has mentioned Warbler a couple times for our audience members. Thermoplastic is a totally it's similar, but also it's a plastic material that is heat formable. It's a lot more rigid than our foam. Foam, I feel like, in a way, is even more versatile than thermoplastic can be. So,
Yep.
So if anybody's curious, so sorry about that.
Oh no, I think that's an important thing to point out, because when you're just starting out in cosplay, you're going to run across those words a lot when you are looking at what people are doing. And because the industry is changing so fast, there's so many different new materials and new ways of doing things, especially when it comes to painting and sealing and taking the time. Like, everyone wants to do things faster and better. And so the processes that you will find in tutorials that were published 4 or 5 years ago, things have changed a lot since then. So it's good to know what Worbla is, what thermoplastics are, but also know that they are a little bit more higher price point, and you do not need to achieve amazing results with an expensive material. You can use the EVA foam to do exactly that.
Yes, that is the conclusion of our talks, is that you don't need a lot of money to make amazing Wasp costumes.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, and this is gorgeous. Like, this is,
Thank you.
yeah. Of course, I think everyone knows you for your Wasp and your Hello. your work is always incredible, and I'm so happy we're able to talk to you about it. So next, we actually have, once again, is this the first time you use Cricut? In the next slide, you have a shield here, and it has a lot of detail on it. So
I cut that out by hand. That particular
You cut that out by hand?
Yes,
So, hey, once again,
like
you
3 days.
don't need a machine. You don't need a robot. You just need your hands, and you can do this.
Yeah, I had a good movie happening in the background, and I took my time. And that's the thing. You got to be patient with yourself. Yeah, for sure. But that other slide, the one that is not painted, that one I believe is the one that I use the Cricut with. Yes. So that one, and I should have had them side by side so you could see the difference. The difference is that one of them is an exact mirror of each of itself. And I actually,
I don't even notice.
You don't notice, but I actually kind of prefer my original shields because I did cut it out by hand, and I think that there's a lot of because when you're thinking about the object and the history of the object, that was forged by an Asgardian somebody, and probably done by hand. It doesn't need to be perfect, and so I think that sometimes using these robot, like the Cricut or laser cutter or whatever, 3D printer, can sometimes take a little bit of the hand forged feeling out of it. So you can do things to your EVA foam, something called weathering. You can give it battle damage, which is basically just, literally like putting more cuts into it and kind of beating it up a little bit and then painting it to make it look a little bit more weathered and worn. But yeah, it's easy to get something that looks super pristine and super precise, but it also, you can get the same great results with cutting everything by hand.
That is a great thing to mention to people, is that honestly, just because you have to do it by hand, it doesn't invalidate your craft. I think that's what people sometimes are, because we have access to a lot of these machines now, is that it's honestly, the people who do it by hand, I'm actually more amazed by that, because that's more dedication and honestly just as much skill as trying to do it on a computer. It's incredible. So, and we have your not Athena helmet. Athena. Okay, I'm I couldn't remember which god it was.
Yes.
So so this is incredible, because this actually shows your process as far as the pattern making. So did you make a duct tape form of your head before you made this pattern, or how did you go about patterning a foam piece?
This particular one, so that headstand, that's actually my face. And I, years ago, I went to a convention and stood in a Shapeify My Life booth, and they did a 3D scan of you in your costume. I don't know that they're around anymore. But then a couple years after that, I went and got my body scanned. And so I have a 3D version of my head that I do print out sometimes, or have someone print out for me. And that is a great way to have a good form, a good something to work on. But you can do a duct tape dummy of your head or just of the whatever, wherever that's going to be
the
fitting.
cranium.
Yeah. So I did create I think I used tinfoil and paper. There might be another slide right underneath the one that we're looking at right now that has more of the steps.
Oh,
so
the process. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So these are the same steps that I take with every project. This particular one, I think I started with, you can see there's masking tape, paper, painter's tape, and then there's tinfoil. I use all of those materials to make templates, and then I will take half of it. I'll make the whole thing, make sure it fits. Especially with a helmet, you want to make sure that if you're going to wear a wig underneath it, make it a little bit bigger, which is what I had to do. Then I made a paper version, which is that blue version there. And then I made a mock-up with 2 or maybe it was 4 millimeter EVA foam, one of my favorite thicknesses. And then I kept building on top of that to finally create the final version there, which is that gold version. There are a lot of materials that I stuck on top of this foam, which is another great property of foam that you were talking about layers at the beginning of this podcast. You can layer so many things on top of the foam because you can glue so many things to it. You can use super glue, you can use contact cement, I use Gorilla Glue, super glue. I just did a Baby Yoda pod for a project recently, and it was a big workshop, and everybody got Gorilla Glue, super glue, which I haven't used a lot of, but it worked really well.
It worked.
Yeah, and I didn't need to wear a respirator, which is really nice. The filigree pieces that you're seeing there, that's another thermoplastic called Thebra, and then I just super glue that on top. I mean, it's just great. It's kind of amazing to see what you can do with one sheet of something, and then you can create these complex forms that look like metal.
Definitely. And I think also I love your patterning technique, because going back to our audience and the beginners who might be in our audience, the nice thing about doing the duct tape or the kind of taped form, as you see in the lower right-hand corner of your image, is that you're able to just kind of like, if you maybe don't like the way a piece lays, like, you put on the side cheek piece and you don't like how it lays, you can just, take the tape form and just like pull it off, reshape it. Like it's once again, super cheap, super easy to pattern something really nice. So have at it, everyone.
Oh yeah, tinfoil is one of my favorite things to sculpt with. And I've made horns that way. I've made pauldrons that way, the shoulder armor, which is a real challenge for a lot of beginners because of that big curve. It's kind of hard to figure out like exactly how that curve is going to do when you're just looking at it from like a flat sheets to start with. But tinfoil is a really, really great place to start because you can tape, you can add to it, you can take away, you can cut with it, or you can cut it. Yeah, I always have some in my shop.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I love seeing your process. And then the next slide, I know we're going to get, we talked about forming, but I know this actually, I think this is dragon skin, but I think it hits more on the adhesion to fabric of foam or foam-like materials. So,
well, yeah. Let me talk a little bit about this because so the green part of the pants here, the what you're seeing, that's actually silicone, and so I used EVA foam. I used adhesive EVA foam to layer on top of the bodysuit that I had made. And then I took those adhesive pieces and I stuck them into my mold boxes. And so what you're seeing there in that pink version right there, what you're seeing there is it's an EVA foam piece that I have glazed over with a very light layer of silicone. And then I made a resin mold on top of that. And so you flip the resin mold over and you pour the silicone in. So I wanted to include that in there to say that the EVA foam is also a really great material to use for other kinds of applications, like if you need to make a mold of something, or the adhesive part of that is a really great method of making sure that something's going to proportionally fit the way that you want it to pretty quickly. Because you can take the sticky back, you can take that on and off a fabric all day long. I wouldn't necessarily wear that to a convention unless it's, really going to just stay in place. But the sticky back foam you can get at a craft store, and I always have a lot of it on hand. I make mock-ups all the time with it.
That's a very good point. I didn't think about that. So for those in the audience, if you have like a costume or fabric or something that has these complex shapes on it, you can kind of help pattern them, like Beverly said, with the sticky back. So there is the adhesive on one back, and it's easily kind of like pulled away from fabric, put on fabric, and it holds pretty well for like your patterning process. So that's awesome. That's an amazing tip. I love that.
Yeah.
So, oh, no, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, no, I love seeing the process of it's also easily moldable. I don't know. The applications of foam, as we've discussed before, are just so versatile. Like, I mean, we could talk about it for a month. But yeah, so actually I was going to go to probably the Cara Dune next, because that's your current project. So after everything you've learned over all of these projects, I'm really curious to see how you've utilized that, because I think Cara is kind of the culmination of everything you've learned, especially with the really nice edges on like some of her gribblies, as they say, and things like that. So I'm really curious. So Nick, can we go back to the images and go next to the Star Wars, the Cara Dune?
Yeah.
Yay! She's so beautiful. So this is incredible. And I feel like just kind of focusing the conversation, it looks like we're going to go into using the different styles of dowel rods and shapes that you can buy with foam for trims.
Well, you would think that, yes, but I didn't have any at the time, and so I cut them into bevels. So what you're seeing here is this is I believe 6mm or maybe even 8mm EVA foam, a sheet, and then the edging is 10mm foam that I cut on an angle, on two different angles, to create the triangular bevel shape that you're seeing that goes all the way around the edge. It would definitely be way easier if I had the dowels. And if I was to make this again, I would probably just use those dowels, because cutting this does take quite a while. But it is nice to be able to do it if you need to. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I'm just going to go on camera real quick and show people that you can purchase the foam in various like shapes and dowels. There are round dowels of various sizes. There are these triangle dowels. As you can see, it's a triangle. And then there are these kind of more hexagonal dowels. But yeah, so you can, once again, you can totally do it by hand, and you can be a rebel like Beverly, but you also have now amazing resources like these incredible trims and dowels that you can glue directly onto your armor. So that's actually an incredible resource. And yeah, so thank you so much. And back to Miss Cara Dune. So that is an incredible. I am genuinely curious about the next, maybe not the next image with the greeblies.
Yeah,
those little super detailed, and they blow me away. But I would love to know more about how you got all of these really fine details and things.
So let's see. This was definitely, these pieces were too thick for me to put through my Cricut. So I had to cut these out by hand. Yeah, but I just use a very sharp, I had to keep sharpening my blade. That's kind of the key for making sure that you get nice edges and that you don't cut yourself. Is to make sure you have a very sharp knife. I know that doesn't make sense, but it really does. If you're not applying too much force to your knife, you have a way less of a chance of cutting yourself, because you're trying to drag a dull knife through material. So, but I'm digressing. So these little pieces, they are super cute. And the thing that I love about these is that they are, I don't know if you can tell, but there are layers to these small pieces. Gosh, and I'm trying to think, like, if I can reach any of the costume pieces. I don't think I can reach them right now to show you, but this picture is great. So this is a mix of 2mm foam, and then there are thicker pieces on there that that are just glued on. Yeah,
Okay.
and so I really had to consider the different layers, what kinds of thicknesses would achieve the different heights that I wanted to have. Like everything is very, I mean, it's amazing the amount of detail that can go into one of these things. And I really wanted to do a great job with being true to the prop in the show. So I spent a lot of time making mock-ups and then making a template. And then because I'm doing this with my friend, I had the chance to make all of these things twice.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, you did. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm doing this with my friend Melanie. But yeah, these are some of my favorite little tiny pieces. I love them. There's just something so precious about them all. But yeah, they're very precise.
Incredible.
I made these, and I can't remember the type of foam that because I always have a mixture of foam in my shop, but this is all EVA foam. And what I did here was I glued them all together, and then I heat sealed them all. That way I had the glue helping me keep these tiny little pieces together before, because if you heat up very thin pieces of foam, if you heat that up and it's not adhered to something, it's going to curl up, like we saw in that other slide of the wasp torso pieces. So if you glue things down before you heat them, especially when they're small pieces like this, that is going to help you tremendously with keeping the shape and keeping you from getting frustrated.
Okay. And can you explain heat sealing? Like, so what exactly are you doing when you heat seal a foam?
So I think that you had talked about it before, but heat sealing is really getting the surface, the open cell surface of the foam. You're applying the heat, and you're kind of sucking all of that air has to go somewhere. And so when it is kind of taken out of the foam surface, the cell will close.
Okay.
And so it kind of what's the word?
It evaporates. That's a bad term, but essentially it's just pulling it.
Yeah.
So
better word for it.
So essentially, the heat sealing is done after the process and the gluing is complete. And essentially, I mean, just to interject, heat sealing is a great tool to use before you start to paint something, because once again, as you're closing the cells of the foam, you're actually smoothing out the surface layer as well. So you're providing a much smoother paint surface later on. So it's a really good middle step in between crafting and then painting. So it's like, that's another thing about like foam or any sort of craft. It's always just like the little steps in between that are going to give you like, just make your life easier down the road. So you have less sanding, less priming. It's so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, so thank you so much for explaining that, because I think heat sealing is something that a lot of maybe people using foam, even more advanced people, are unaware of, to be honest. But all right, so back to our slide. We're back to now you can really see that detail that we were talking about with the Cricut. So that was the not like the scoring or embossing you were doing.
Yep, that was all done. I did that in strips, and actually I used the Cricut to make a big 12 by 24 sheet of the scales, and then I cut my pattern pieces out of that sheet, and then glued them on top of the base surface. So there's several layers of foam happening here. The scales are all 2mm, because that is the maximum size that you can put through a Cricut or a Silhouette machine at the moment. Yeah.
That's cool. So 12 by 24. All right, guys, 12 by 24. That's what you got to aim for now. So I think actually the image of the horned helmet, it kind of looks like antlers, 2 down, that one. Now, we haven't quite hit too much on Hella, but I know a lot of people are really curious about kind of just the process of, you have this huge form, but as we know, like, even though foam gets a little heavy as, you know, you're crafting with it, and it's kind of like, it can bend and sink without structure. So can you kind of explain how you thought about the structure of this helmet, what foam you choose for, if it was like a 70 or
Yeah, for sure. So I've made this helmet twice, which I know is crazy, but I love it so much. The first version went away, and the second version I'm keeping forever. But both times I made them the same way. So the horns are massive. They are at least the span of my arms,
like
if not a little bit more.
That's crazy.
And
That's
so,
like 6.
yeah, it's pretty impressive how wide they are. But they're very light. They're my new set weighs just over 2 pounds, maybe 2.5 pounds. My first version weighed just over 2 pounds. So it's possible to make these very light. And the way that I did that was, these horns are really actually pretty thin, and excuse me, they are cantilevered. They're removable from the base helmet. They are cantilevered because I embedded PVC pipe into almost all of them, so that they could all be removed. So when I take my helmet off, I look like a pinhead, because I've got little plugs sticking up that the horns kind of plug into for each one. So I can break this thing down, I can store it. I can also, if something breaks, I can make another one. It's not going to ruin the whole thing if something happens to one of the horns.
Incredible.
But yeah, EVA foam is such a lightweight material to begin with, that when I started, I think that the starting weight of all of my materials, I think when I weighed it, was like 3 pounds. And so I knew that wasn't going to be a big deal for me to wear on my head. And by carving, so what I started with was, I think it was 8mm sheets. So I sandwiched those, and I put coat hanger wire to help me curve the horns into place, which is a really great inexpensive material to use as well. I just glued the coat hanger wire inside the layers. And then the PVC pipe more towards the base to help give it some structure and some support. Then I was able to shape the horns into the curves that I wanted with my heat gun. And then I used my Dremel tool, which is a rotary tool, to help shape the edges, so it wasn't just a blocky Minecraft looking type helmet.
You're right. So that's the other really good tool for anyone using foam, is the Dremel. So it's just like, the little rotary sanding tool that you can get at really any hardware or craft store now. I know Michael's has them now. So and that's kind of, as you can see on the helmet, like, you can get those really, or even on Cara Dune, as we saw, you can get those really nice soft edges. And foam sands really well. Like, it's really incredible.
I will say that if we're talking about sanding foam, there's a whole art to that as well. And the quality of the foam that you have is really going to dictate the ease of which your sanding process is going to go. I think that one of my favorite foams to sand is the HD foam from SDCC that you can get at Blick. And that foam sands like butter. It's pretty amazing. But all of the foam that you buy from the foam suppliers can, like Yaya Han's foam, sands really well. TNT Cosplay Supply sands really, really well as well. So there is a grain to the foam, and so when you're sanding, you will notice that, especially when you're using rotary tool, when you're standing in a certain direction, it's going to give you a texture, and then you flip it over and sand it in the other direction, you might not get that texture. So when you're using a rotary tool, pay attention to that, because that can affect the edges of your foam.
Yeah, incredible. So just look up a few different YouTube tutorials as far as what direction as you're sanding is best for the foam. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but you're right. Like, depending on if you go like maybe down with the foam or up with the foam, it actually gives a different surface. Like, it's very interesting.
Yeah, anything, of course, that I work with Dremel tools.
Yay, Dremel.
But anything that you're doing that is sanding any material pretty much is gonna also produce a lot of dust. And one has to be really cautious of dust. Dust is as dangerous to health as a lot of these chemicals and solvents are.
So you need
So,
this. You need
wearing masks is a critical element, especially if you're sanding, you know, things like fiberglass or resins or plaster or other things which are producing very, very fine dust that hangs in the air for a period of time. One of the ways of a couple of ways of getting around that issue. In my workshop, I have a vacuum cleaner that is under the bench with the nozzle pointing up to the front of the bench. And when I'm sanding, I turn the vacuum cleaner on and I start to sand so that as much as possible is sucked into the vacuum cleaner rather than being in the atmosphere. And the other thing, if you're in if you haven't got a big setup, you know, just take your sanding outside and stand with the wind on your back. Because when the wind is on your back, anything that you're sanding, the dust is being taken away from you rather than towards you. If you stand and there's wind blowing on your face, then you are sucking in all of that dust and that other stuff.
Yeah.
I just thought I would throw that in.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's always important when explaining materials to also explain the safety elements, because I mean, with anything there might be hazards involved. So we want all of our viewers to be aware.
Yeah. I also want to point out that I have heard stories, and I can completely see how this would happen. Someone using or heating a lot of EVA foam in their house can create a toxic environment for small animals. So birds, if you have birds, don't do this. Make sure you open a window and have a fan blowing these fumes that you're releasing from the EVA foam. Have it blowing outside. So keep your pets' best health in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
safety first.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point as well. We don't really, even though maybe we're like, oh, well, I'm a strong person and I can take the fumes for a little bit. I mean, you know, maybe my little kitty cat can't take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're all used to wearing masks by now, so we should have no problem.
Oh, yeah. I've actually been, to be honest, that's the funny thing. I think getting used to wearing masks, I find myself grabbing my mask more often as I craft now. So, I mean, that's
me too.
thing.
But
awesome. Well, I think we can go back to so this kind of just is going back to explaining the different densities of foam and how they cut. So are these slides by chance available on your website, Beverly? Like these particular slides?
I can make them available for sure. They're screenshots from the video tutorials that I have up on my website and on my YouTube channel.
YouTube.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. This is a Cricut for Cosplay series that I did. And in this one, I'm just giving you some tips and tricks for using EVA foam and two different kinds and putting that through your Cricut maker. So I give you all the settings. Well, recommended settings. I mean, there's always a bazillion different ways to do things. So these methods work for me. But yeah, I use two different density foams. EVA 38 foam is a softer version. You can get this at TNT Cosplay Supply. And then the EVA 70 foam, which you can see on the screen there, is very dense, sewable, it's stronger, it's stiffer.
I love 70.
A little bit longer. Yeah, I love the 70
all the time because I love, I don't know what it is, but for me, anytime I'm crafting, even though like, you know, I understand versatility of foam, but like I'm always paranoid. I'm going to go to an event or travel with a costume and there's always that element of it might break or something happens to it. So I'm always looking for like the stronger foam, but yeah, so Exactly. So for our audience, I just wanted to let everyone know, if you would like more information on any of the subjects we've talked about today, Beverly has an incredible YouTube channel. It's just under the name Downen Creative Studios
Downen
on
Creative
YouTube.
Studios. Yep. I
Perfect.
mean, you type in the word Downen and you'll
Yeah.
find me. It's a very unusual name.
Exactly. No, exactly. Downen, Downen, anywhere on the internet, that's where you can find her and find her amazing plethora of knowledge. So incredible. And then I think we're going right into kind of, because you recently did, okay, this is another reason I wanted to bring Beverly on today, is that she did a workshop with Adam Savage, Tested.com, Silicon Comic Con. I think it's just basically her work is being recognized because she is an incredible, because she's an incredible disseminator of knowledge. Like, not only is she an incredible crafter, but she also helps do workshops for other people. So this is one I actually did with her, which was a Yoda pram. Like, we kind of made a tiny pram for our Funko Pop little baby Yodas that everyone has now. Like, let's be honest. I think I actually see mine up there, but
Oh, cute.
oh yeah. So this is one workshop that she has done, and it kind of just shows you, once again, you don't even have to use foam for cosplay. Also, she did like 10 of these little prams because you just wanted to make sure that you were knowledgeable about this material.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this particular workshop was that they were sending kits out, and so they had laser cut the foam, and they sent all the pieces out to everyone. So we were, as you know, assembling them all together, and so I really wanted to make sure that the pattern was easy to follow and something that wasn't going to take 6 hours to put together, even though it did take 30 hours. But those files are actually available for free on their website and on mine, siliconsj.com and downencreativestudios.com. And you can just download the pattern, trace them over to foam, and then there's a free video on their website, which is the build video that we did for that workshop. And I designed it. I wanted it to be something easy and unintimidating for beginners. There were a lot of kids in that workshop, which just warmed my heart, and they were excited about using the foam maybe for the first time. And I am really hoping that a few new makers were born from that workshop, because that's always my goal.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed with that too. There were a lot of families in the workshop. So once again, if anybody is curious and they kind of want to dip their feet into foam, Beverly does have the little Baby Yoda pram files, and also live stream the video of the workshop available online. So yeah, there it is. So yeah, it's perfect for your little Yoda Funko Pop or any little Baby Yoda. So exactly, it's a great starter. Easy for kids to follow. I think that's also the amazing part about not only foam, but your resources, is that it is easy for people to follow. And I hope that once again, your workshops, your work has, I mean, honestly, to be honest, it has helped create new makers. Let's be honest. Like, a lot of people come to you for resources. Like, it's really incredible. So honestly, Nick, at this point, I want to thank Beverly for coming on and sharing a lot of her knowledge, unless there's something we missed. Like, I honestly felt really invigorated by this chat. So
yeah, me too. There's so much more we could talk about, but it's getting an overview topic is always a great place to start before people start kind of glazing over.
Especially for people who are just starting, because so often when people are really into the subject, they kind of use a sort of shorthand of terms that they recognize, but the new guy's going, "What was that? What was it? Sorry, what are they talking about?" So that's relevant too. We do have some images that we haven't touched on.
I am so sorry. I was just really wrapped up into the workshop.
Okay, and you've got some others that I will rattle through. If that's, I mean, they've got to be here for a reason.
Sure, we can do that. No, we can do that.
Tell us about the anything that you want to tell us about this. This looks like it combines, you know, all of your layers and your various techniques.
Oh, that's true. How you've layered foam to create the shield, but also the detail. So I think that's, once again, for our beginners, kind of explaining that, you know, foam, if you layer it, it can be an incredible material.
And is the sword made of foam too?
It is not. That's a resin. That's a resin cast. But my master was made with wood and some foam and some other materials as well.
Actually, cut. If you were trying to do something really on the cheap to take to school or Halloween, you could actually cut that out of foam and put a resin or something over the top of it to make it firm and lightweight.
Yep. Yep. And you can sandwich things in between layers of foam to make a slightly more rigid center, so that your sword doesn't kind of like droop down. Like even a wooden dowel or something like that is pretty easy to embed in between two layers of foam, and then you've got a really cool LARPing sword, or playing around with your buddy's sword.
Yeah, that's true.
What I would say when people are working with new materials, you know, don't create your something you're really fond of and then pour something over it without actually testing one material on another material off to the side.
I've done that too many times. You just get too excited.
Hours making is just melted or something. So, you know, always test your materials one against the other as a tester on the side.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think even though you're pretty excited that you made something and you just want to move on to the next step, like just take a second to test, test chemicals and glues just to make sure it doesn't eat through your foam or something crazy. So yeah.
Okay. So what is this slide about?
Okay, so I included a lot of different, so I made a tutorial for a magazine all about EVA foam. And so some of these slides are from that write-up that I did. And this particular slide is just demonstrating the different thicknesses and the different types of foam that were available at the time. This was just a few years ago. And so now there are so many different kinds of foam that are available. It's this is kind of an antiquated picture right now, but the you're seeing like the colored foam. There's some adhesive foam in there. There's some floor mat foam in there. There's some 4 millimeter, probably some 8 millimeter. I wanted to include this to illustrate the different types of thicknesses and different kinds of foam that's out there.
But I think to start off with, for someone who's just starting with those simpler foams that we were initially talking about, starting with your floor mats and then going on to EVA foam in a natural progression, because otherwise this can be very confusing. Like you stand in the store and say, what the hell am I going to buy? It's just on the simplest level. Tell me about this.
So this is, I was talking before about having a sharp knife versus having a dull knife. So there's a safety element to that. You always want to have a sharp knife when you're cutting this material. It also helps the quality of your cut. So the bottom layer here was cut with a sharp knife, and the upper layer was cut with a dull knife. So if you are having a hard time with your edges just looking, you know, awful, and you're getting dismayed, use a sharper knife. These are all just kind of some maker tips for using the foam. This is an illustration of the different kinds of textures that you might find on the EVA foam floor mats that you find at a hardware store. Sometimes they can be used for.
I mean, if you're creating a particular character, you're limited by whatever the design was. But if you're just making something for yourself, you could actually make use of these surfaces as a quite an interesting finish.
Yeah, you can also sand the surface down, or just flip them over because they will be smooth on the other side.
Right.
Yeah. These are the different materials that I recommend that you have, just rulers and some utility knives and Sharpies so that you can write on your foam.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as like maybe if somebody is using a different style, do you just use X-Acto blades, or do you have any knives that need to be sharpened that aren't disposable? Or do you only use really disposable knives when you're cutting foam?
I really just use X-Actos and utility knives. I do have a scalpel actually as well from Micromark Tools, and that scalpel is really nice.
Nice.
It's surgical steel, which is really, really sharp, but it's also kind of brittle, so you can't really put a lot of force with it. But yeah, just a regular utility knife is just fine for this
fine.
foam work. Yeah,
Perfect.
no fancy knife necessary.
No.
Now, this photo is an example of what you can achieve when you use instead of doing a straight cut through foam, if you angle your knife and you do like an angled cut, you can create cool different kinds of shapes when you glue them together.
Yeah, beautiful. It's incredible. You're right. If you just kind of cut it and shape it in the right direction, you can get great bevels like that and corners.
And of course, if you cut like a V out of one side that doesn't go all the way through, when you glue it like this, you get a nice soft shape on the other side, which is the same idea, but just with a softer edge.
Yeah, that's a good point too. You can't, if you just cut that little ridge out of it or bevel out of it, yeah, you can get a really nice soft corners.
Yeah. This is just a adhesive sheet of 2mm craft foam that I bought from Joann's. The one thing to keep in mind with this is that it's not going to be as flexible as something that doesn't have the adhesive on it. But I love these for small details and for making mock-ups.
Mock-ups, like you showed us with the fabric boots, because you were able to mock it up and then pull it off, and it was incredible.
More kinds of foam. So the sheets of foam that you get from TNT Cosplay Supply or other places can come in a roll, and so that was my foam stash at the time. That's usually what my foam stash looks like. Yeah,
it's incredible.
These are different glues that I have used in the past, or lots of other glues. This is a photo from a couple years ago, so there are some new products on the out there, but these are pretty commonly found in a hardware store. The barge cement, once again, you can find that at a local leatherworking store, or you can find it on Amazon and get that there. The respirator, you want to have that kind of respirator. It's and I always forget the name of it. Oh, it's right over here. I'm gonna actually tell you what the version is.
Yeah,
because you don't want to just get something that looks like it, because it's not going to work. It's the NIOSH, and I don't know how to pronounce that word, but this is a 3M 60923 respirator. The one with you really want to make sure that you are careful about what kind you use.
Exactly. Exactly. Because even though these look similar, it's there are different filters inside of it that actually filtrate different things, whether it's fumes or only particulates. So just be wary of what kind of respirator, but also what kind of filter you're putting inside of it, because that's
exactly.
Yeah, it's particular. We've all suddenly got very used to masks in the last. A lot of the masks the kind of masks that people are wearing for COVID, they're not chemical masks. They're not going to filter out, particular chemicals that you're working with. I know we're talking about foam, and so you aren't getting as much of the chemical infiltration as you do with other materials like fiberglass or resins of any kind, or solvents, or whatever else. It's no good just putting on a particle mask and thinking that's going to save you from the toluene that is in your contact adhesive, because it isn't. And although you are, quite likely to survive, from inhaling your toluene, it's not necessarily. It could turn you into someone like me, because when we were making the creatures for the Mos Eisley Cantina, we were it was
Sorry.
snowing outside. And so we were all cold, and we were working till like 11 o'clock at night.
Oh my gosh.
The sun had gone down, and there was snow outside, so we had all the windows nice and tightly closed.
Oh
And
no.
I would be foaming latex on one side of this small room, which was filling the room with ammonia, and we would be painting with toluene paint on the other side of the room. And I suspect that we were high half the time. So it's not something that I recommend. If you want to keep all your brain cells.
Yes,
Yeah.
all the brain cells.
That's a funny story. I can't. It's the stories that you share of like working on the Cantina or Yoda are pretty incredible. I always enjoy them.
So getting back to the last of these, I think we've got just a few more.
Oh, this is an example of what the surface can change when you apply heat. On the left is unsealed with a heat gun, and on the right is sealed with the heat gun. So it does. That's the result of the
with
foam
the cells. Yeah, got it.
When they're closed. Yep.
And
the next one is so this is an example of how you can form pieces of EVA foam with a little bit of heat. So the one on the right has been heated up, and I use my thumb and probably my knee to make that shape.
Is that pretty much the maximum that you can shape it, or can you blow it like a bubble?
Oh, you can't really blow it like a bubble. I would say that depending on the thickness of the foam and the density of the foam, that can make a difference with the amount of manipulation that you can have with the foam. But for this particular one, this is, I think, probably 4 millimeter foam. That might be about it. Yeah, this is just an example of after I glued the corset together, then you heat seal everything.
Once again, when you're dealing with industrial heat guns, you can do a really good job of burning yourself.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, I just use a hairdryer that's got a double switch on it, so that you can pop the heat up to get the maximum, and then as it's getting super hot, you can knock it back down until it starts to cool a little too much. So very often I'm doing that when I'm using heat on items.
Yeah.
And this is an example that shiny breastplate piece, that's all foam. And the corset underneath, so that is a vinyl layer that is glued to a foam corset base.
Yeah,
so this is a mixed media here.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the gold part paint, or have you layered it with something?
That's paint.
Right.
So that was, I believe, probably sealed with heat and then plasti dipped, which is a spray can of like a rubber, excuse me. And then after that, painted with the gold paint.
And what gold?
That remains flexible.
But what gold paint? What paint do you recommend?
So there is a new product now. It's called Plaid FX paint. That's a flexible paint. It's an acrylic paint. It's non-toxic. You can it's formulated specifically for foam, and so that is a really great one to use because it will flex and it won't crack, and it's very easy to use. You can brush it on. What you can also do is if you don't have that paint or access to that paint, you can use fabric medium mixed with acrylic paint. Just like a 50-50 mix or less, 50, like 25, 50 of the paint, 25 of the fabric medium. And that will achieve flexibility with your acrylic paint as well. And that's what I've used for years, is that mixture.
A lot of metallic paints, so golds and silvers and other stuff, don't really look metallic. They can look quite phony. There must be some paints that you've found that are better than others.
Yes, they're some of my favorites. I do love. It's not necessarily a paint, but Rub and Buff is a it's a metallic. It's like a metallic waxy kind of a material that you can rub on top of pretty much any sealed surface, and you buff it down, and it's gorgeous. Actually, that that Lady Sif shield, the silver shield. That's all rub and buff.
Rub and buff?
Yeah, and my Hippolyta costume, a lot of that is rub and buff. Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh, we're coming down towards the end here.
Yes.
Oh, beautiful paint.
I think we saw this earlier, didn't we? Is it the same
I saw
one?
this earlier. Yep, same one. This one was painted with the paints that I was just talking about, the Plaid FX paints, the flexible paints.
Yeah,
Right.
the latex. Okay, cool.
Yep.
And then finally, your super
Super helmet.
Super helmet, spider hat.
Ego.
My alter ego, yes. I am a villainous alter. My other self is a Marvel villain.
I love it. It's incredible. I mean, what a way. Yeah, what a last slide. Hella. Like, that's incredible. She is incredible.
So I got to thank you, ladies, for your time and in putting this together. You know, we have people who watch us on a Sunday, but these videos sit out there for weeks, and we get quite a lot of people that will come by and look at them later on. So for any of you that enjoyed this particular video, you can come back and watch the whole thing again if you want to, and stop it at various points to make notes about what these ladies, how these ladies have shared their knowledge and experience with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute honor to be a part of this, your event production schedule. It's just been awesome. And I love the mission that you have here with bringing inspiration to young'uns, and love it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will call you in again sometime to talk about something else.
Excellent. Count me in.
Thank you, Beverly. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And Cynthia, as always, you're such a mainstay of what we do here. If it wasn't for you, I think about a third of our videos wouldn't have happened. And I'm always grateful for your investment in time and
oh, good. I like I said, I'm the same as Beverly. I appreciate the mission of Follow Your Star. We love the Yoda exhibit in the Caribbean. We want it to continue. So yeah, like, I mean, and also, like, I love chatting about cosplay. Like, that's exactly why it's so easy for me to just say, like, yes, I can do a video on that. Like, so yeah. I'm here for you.
Cool. Well, thank you. And we will see you again next time. Take care and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So here we are at the end of another one of our shows. If you enjoyed this, as I was saying, you can watch it over the next couple of weeks. Don't don't forget that we are we have our Patreon supporters. These are people who donate $5 or $10 each month to help to keep the museum going. We are a non-profit, so no one's making money out of this. We're just using it to pay the bills to get us through this horrible COVID period. We're in the Caribbean, which is nice for weather, but means that we're really stuck for tourists right now, and will be almost certainly for the rest of the year. So please consider supporting us through that Patreon link. This is that Yoda guy, Nick Maley, saying, have a great week, and may the Force expand your horizons and be with you always. Take care, and I'll see you again.